The pandemic has taken a greater toll than anyone could have anticipated, impacting the health and livelihoods of many. And we know by now that COVID has had a negative impact on people's mental health too. So with this in mind, we tend to forget that people living with chronic conditions have had to be even more careful, and as a consequence have seen themselves even more isolated, which has had an effect on both their loved ones, care partners, and of course themselves. Now, we've also learned through George's and Brian's video that depression can be a very real part of living with Parkinson's, but that both found ways to manage that depression. So to expand on this further, our next session focuses on the strategies and tools to help manage depression and promote good emotional health. So to talk us through this, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome back Dr. Slyvia Bartley. So Slyvia, welcome back to the conference.
Thank you very much, Gemma. And wow, what a conference this has been so far. Such powerful stories and such inspiration. And, you know, Paul, I am a fan of the Vicar of Dimley, so I am so delighted to meet you and know that you wrote that. So this is the last talk, and unfortunately we've gone from being very happy to having something that is going to be potentially a sad talk, but a talk that will provide some hope as well. So let me just share a story with you about myself. When I was 4 years of age, I remember quite clearly standing in a dimly lit room, squeezing the life out of my mother's hand. And both of us, together with my two sisters, we were peering at this open casket. And in the casket was this tiny body of my little brother. He was 13 months of age. He had died, and it was very, very sudden. 1 minute he was here, the next he was gone. And I stared at that coffin, looking at him. He was impeccably dressed. He had a rosary around his neck. His hair was perfectly combed. He had on a nice little, suit, trousers, and a shirt. But yet he was still and motionless. And it dawned on me that he was no longer coming back. And I really didn't understand that at 4 years of age. And I started to question the meaning of life. Where is his spirit? Where did he go? And more sadly, wherever he went, I want to go with him. And so you fast forward to approximately 6 months on, I had a patent ductus arteriosus. Simply put, I had a hole in my heart. And I ended up in hospital having major open heart surgery. They went through my back, they cracked my ribs, they put in a valve, they closed the hole. But it was a very traumatic surgery and it was very painful. But I don't remember any of it. And my mother tells me that when I came home from being in months of being in a hospital, I did not speak for a whole year. And when I think about that, I say to myself, what kind of trauma did I experience that I internalized and disconnected from the world for a whole year? And then I realized when I look back on it, that these were the early 2 signs of my depression. So I lived with major reoccurring depression. In 2017, I took myself to the psychiatrist and she diagnosed me. And she said it confidently, you've got major, moderate, reoccurring depression. And I stared back and said back confidently to her, no, I don't. I know what major depression is. I don't have any of those symptoms. And we went back and forth until I realized and recognized that I have been living with depression all my life. But by acknowledging it, I started on the path of healing, because once you acknowledge and once you speak about it, you can start doing the work to get the treatment that you deserve. But she also told me that I had been self-treating myself consciously or unconsciously by the mindful techniques that I have used to just simply get through the day and get through life. And so it's these strategies that I'm going to share with you today. Now, I am not a medical doctor. I am not a practicing physician, but I am deeply engaged in functional medicine. I read up a lot about that. And I am a neuroscientist. If you were here earlier, You heard Chris Jarvis talk about neuroplasticity. That was the essence of my research for 13 years. So looking at my condition, the neuroscience, and working in Medtronic for deep brain stimulation therapy for 13 years, having the pleasure and the access to the best minds of neurologists and scientists, and meeting people living with Parkinson's disease from around the world, I've made a few connections. And it's these connections and strategies and tools that works for me that I'm going to share with you. Now, I am not saying that they're going to work for anyone who is listening that is experiencing depression, but I'm really hoping that at least one of these strategies will be of use to you. So let's start by talking about depression. I said I love to connect things. And when I look at, and people on the call will know this very well, when I look at depression and I look at chronic illnesses, there is a high prevalence. Whether it's the illness is diagnosed and then comes depression, or the depression is diagnosed and then come a chronic illness, there is a really high prevalence. And with Parkinson's disease, depression is one of the early symptoms, together with your loss of smell. And at least 40 to 50% of people living with Parkinson's experience depression. One factor that I want to home in on is that people like myself who live with depression, we have high circulating levels of inflammatory markers. And I want you to remember that as we go through this talk. I also want to frame the talk up appropriately by saying I am not talking about strategies that will help mental health. I'm talking about emotional health. And this description is a really nice way of distinguishing between the two. If you think about hardware of a computer or mental health, think about that as your hardware. Where there's dysfunction or there's damage, right? There may be a psychosis, a loss of touch with reality, hallucinations, schizophrenia. If you're harming yourself, dysfunction, all of these mental illness symptoms, these are things where you really need to go and see a professional. And I am not talking about strategies for these conditions. More so, I'm talking about if you think about the software that can be reprogrammed and updated with therapy. If you have neurosis, like chronic distress, without delusions or hallucinations, if it's external factors or internal, stress, depression, and anxiety, this is what I'm talking about today. And when we think about the last 12 months, when we lived through these unprecedented times and it spiraled out of control pretty quickly, it was really, we had to do the best we can to prevent ourselves from going nuts. Everything was turned on its head. And again, that happened quickly. And nuts is actually an acronym for the novelty of an event, the unpredictable nature of an event, the perceived threat of the event, and the sense of loss of control. And this acronym is associated to how we manage stress. So the first three, completely out of our control. We can't control the event. We know it's unpredictable. We can't do anything about it. And the perceived threat, we can't do anything about that either. But there's one thing that we can do something about, and that's what can we control. And if I think about Matt and Paul and the other panelists that talked about whether they are using comedy and they can control that, whether they're focusing on the little things, these are things that they can control that is giving them a sense of well-being and helping them manage. And I think that is really critical. It's so simple, but yet it's so powerful. So essentially in a stressful situation, we have to look for the one thing that we can control. So let's talk about stress. Stress, the stress response, I'm sure if you go back to your high school days and you think about your physiology, when you're in a stressful situation, and I'm going to use my little gadget here, I hope you can see this. When you're in a stressful situation, let's go back. When you're in a normal situation, your body is in a state of homeostasis. It's functioning normally. When danger occurs, your sympathetic system kicks in and it releases all of these stress hormones and mediators, and it gets our body ready to fight or flight. And that is a physiological response to us being in danger or, we are stressed. We want to get out of that situation. And it's an acute response. So when we get out of that situation, the parasympathetic system kicks in, and the homeostasis of our body goes back to its normal state. There's two other ways in which we respond to stress, and that's freezing or fawning. That is not physiological, i.e. it does not release mediators or stress hormones, but it sends signals that we are frightened, we are not a danger, and hopefully that will dismiss the threat and the danger. So let's talk a little bit more physiology, and I'll try and say this simplistically, because if you think about last year, there was a lot of chronic stress, and people living with chronic illnesses, people's social economic status. There are lots of people around the world, for whatever reason, that is under a lot of chronic stress or toxic stress. And that basically means our system, it's going from doing acute reaction, releasing those stress hormones to be protective, to constantly being in this state, to eventually being in this state of hyperarousal. And when we're in this state, the hormones that initially were supposed to be protective becomes the opposite. It becomes damaging. And when it becomes damaging, it releases other mediators that cause inflammation. And chronic inflammation causes chronic health conditions like cardiovascular disease and conditions like depression. So inflammation is the key thread throughout all of this. In the stressful situations, if it's chronic, can cause inflammatory markers, can cause inflammation. Inflammation can cause these secondary outcomes, and which will lead to health conditions such as depression, cardiovascular, obesity, etc. And just to go off a little bit, if you think about the disproportionate amount of African Americans and people of color that's been impacted by COVID, most of these have these pre-existing conditions of hypertension, obesity, cancer. And this is all to do with the link with inflammation. And so now that we know that, and now that we know that inflammation is a key, what can we do about it? And so I want to talk about the SMART approach to managing emotional health, not mental health, emotional health. And there is this acronym that was created by the American Health and Wellness, Dr. Reba Peoples, functional psychiatrist, talking about sleep, movement, awareness, recognition, and tailoring your inputs. And if you Google this and look it up, you will see it everywhere that these are well-documented tactics and strategies that we can use to manage emotional health and to manage stress. So let's talk about sleep. We all love to sleep, and we all recognize that sleeping is important, but there is significant benefits of sleeping. And when there is sleep deprivation, essentially that can lead to our inflammation, right? So when we don't sleep enough, we are tired, we increase our stress levels, we have less attention span, which in turn adds to the stress and basically causes that decline in cognitive performance. When we do sleep, we clear out our brain, we get rid of those harmful proteins. It's like clearing out the house at nighttime when we're sleeping. A lot of things are taking place physiologically, and it's clearing out these beta amyloid proteins that, by the way, has an association with Alzheimer's dementia. So it's really important that we sleep. And I'm sure if I say to you, put in the chat, how many hours of sleep do you have a night? I'm sure the average will be about 5 or 6, but really we need 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Yes, 7 to 9 hours. When I first heard that, I was like, wow, that's impossible. But now that we're stuck at home and living through COVID, I can't imagine not having at least 8 hours sleep a night. And when I do, I feel fully refreshed, rejuvenated, and ready to tackle the day, whether it's a stressful day or not. And so it's important that we do sleep, that we have sleep hygiene habits, which includes making sure our bedroom's only for sleeping, that not doing multiple things in there, creating an environment that separates us from our office. It's very difficult now that we're at home every day, and some people's office is their bedroom, but somehow we got to make that separation between work and sleep. So when we go to bed, we are only focused on doing things such as sleeping. And, there's certain tips out there. You got to remove, if you're having trouble sleeping, removing blue light, making sure there's no internet connection, making sure there's no television, don't exercise too hard before you go to bed, don't eat immediately before you go to bed. There's a whole wealth of tips and tricks out there that really will help you enhance your sleep. And of course, there are also these supplements that are available. Now, if you're interested in supplements, I would strongly recommend that you consult with your physician before taking any supplements, because supplements can interfere with any medication people are on. So whilst this list is a good list and a proven list, it's important that you consult your practitioner, your physician, your neurologist, or whoever you're seeing before you take any supplements. But these supplements really work. And for me, when I was diagnosed and I recognized what was wrong with me, I shouldn't say what was wrong with me, that is wrong. But when I realized what condition I was living with, I take supplements that, meets the deficit with me when it comes to my hormonal levels. And I feel really great about it. But I did go and see a functional psychiatrist who did all the tests and had a prescription just for me. And that's why it's working for me. So I highly recommend that if possible. You heard a lot about movement earlier. If you attended the sessions during a break and before, movement is really important. And I'm just so grateful that all my life I was actively involved in sports. I was never super good at anything, but I was typically engaged and really working to increase my heart rate, getting my blood flowing through. And it was a really good way of me managing my depression. Whenever I felt down or felt stressed, I just hit that gym, jumped on an ergo machine and pulled like crazy. And it really did help kind of bring me down. And after that, I could meditate really, really well. So, 20 minutes of moderate exercise 4 days a week is as effective as an antidepressant medication in mild to moderate depression. And there's data out there and publications that really does support that claim. I don't know about the data, I just know about my experience. And it really does help to bring me to a different place and a different level. Whether it's a walk around a park, whether it's riding on my Peloton, or going for that ergo or swim, it's really, really useful. But I do it on a consistent basis because I feel like I'm trying to keep it at bay, and it seems to be working very well. And then there's this level of awareness, right? Really being mindful about where you are, what situations you're putting yourself in, and the practices that you adopt to kind of put you in a state of well-being, right? And so one of the things I did a lot, and I remember starting this in 2007 because I was tired of feeling sad and lonely and miserable and isolated, I went internal and I started reading all these books about different approaches to mindfulness, right? And then really seeing how that associated with the brain. And it was really difficult for me at first to start practices like meditation. But as a scientist, an inquisitive one, when I started to do the research and I saw that they were actual functional MRI studies that showed you visibly that when you did mindful things like exercise, it changed the function of your brain. It strengthened the pathways that are associated with the sense of well-being. It decreased the pathways that are associated to what I call the negative chatter. And these are two pathways that goes to the front of the brain, the medial prefrontal cortex. And there's studies being done with people that were experts at meditating. They put them in functional MRI scanners and they showed that difference. There's also anatomical structural changes, physical, and there's also chemical structural changes as well that has been proven with meditation. And there's a wealth of emerging data around this area. And the more we advance in medical technology, like with SPECT scans, the more we can see the overactivity or underactivity of the brain when it comes to those areas. And I actually did this last year. I took a SPECT scan, so I know which part of my brain is overactive and underactive. I know I have a low level of serotonin, 5-hydroxytryptamine, and that means I can go into a spiral and ruminate pretty quick. My basal ganglia is overactive, and my anterior cingular gyra is overactive. So we can pinpoint it down to actual structures. And by knowing that, the psychiatrist prescribes supplements that increases those level of hormones that were deficient. And that's made the wealth of difference, together with exercise, together with oxygen and other things that I've adopted. And so meditation, even though people may think that this is I don't know, hocus pocus, for want of a better term, it really does have scientific benefits, i.e., it does change your brain and it does increase the level of your sense of well-being. And if you want to break it down, there's different brain waves, there's different types of meditation associated with different brain waves. Excuse me. And then the R is for recognition. Who are you? This may be a simple question for some, but for others, it's a hard question. I didn't recognize or even acknowledge what I was living with until I was in my 50s. I lived through my life with this depression. I shoved it, I pushed it back, I did all different kinds of things, and it impacted me in ways I could never have imagined. And once I got to the point of recognizing who I am, and also as a Black person living in a diaspora, it's very difficult to have this sense of identity. You're constantly told that you're not good enough, that you are disadvantaged, that there's all these negative stereotypes and stigma associated with you because I am a Black female living in this world. And all of those things really challenge your sense of identity. And I said earlier on, even before these factors came into play, when I was 4 years of age, I just didn't know what was going on in this world. What was the meaning of life? Why were we here? And then quickly we're taken away. And when we're taken away, where do we go to? So this sense of identity is really important because it really does help us figure out how we're going to show up in this world. And it's all about the internal part, really trying to connect to your path and your purpose, and also being connected to the universe, knowing that there is a power out there that is so greater than us, that has a plan and a path laid out for us. And when we connect with that and we get on path and purpose, our life is so much better. So this sense of identity and knowing who we are is a really important factor as we think about our emotional health. And then lastly, the T in the SMART is tailoring your inputs. And this is a wealth of stuff, from nutrition to environment to media to relationships. And I'm going to fly through those pretty quickly. There could be a seminar on each and every one of these components. But if you think about nutrition, remember I said earlier, inflammation is the key to these chronic illnesses and even depression. There is a direct correlation between gut health and brain health, right? It's called the brain-gut connection. What inflames the gut inflames the brain. So it's really important for us to consider what are we putting in our system. And as part of my self-medicating, consciously or unconsciously, one of the things I did about 10 years ago was really change my diet, really noticing that when I ate foods that had highly loaded with sugar and was not kind of natural food from the earth, my irritable bowels would be awful, my depression would be awful. There was a direct correlation with these things. And so when I decided to cut out gluten and only eat fish and really try and eat, green foods and foods from the earth, which is very difficult, but I tried it, it really made a difference. And during COVID-19, when stress got really bad and depression got bad, I did this 100% and it made the world of difference. Now, I'm not telling everybody you've got to, cut out all the pleasures in your life, but just being aware of what you're putting in your body, what foods are causing inflammation, where you are in your journey, and just try and moderate it to suit where you are in your journey. And I will guarantee you, you will see a difference. And as many of you know, there are lots of foods that cause allergy. They're common no matter who you are and where you're born or live. And, if you eliminate those things, you just feel better. And when you feel better, your brain feels better too. There's nutrition, vitamins. We know that vitamins are important. Ideally, we want to get this from natural foods, but sometimes, particularly in this day and age, our foods are deprived of that. So we can take supplements. And as I mentioned earlier, if you see a functional psychiatrist or a physician, they can really come up with a plan that will tailor to your deficiencies. And going back to what Paul says and what Matt said earlier, those things that give you joy. Anyone knows me knows that I love chocolate. So this diet that I'm on, that's good for my health. I am not giving up chocolate, because that is a simple pleasure in my life, because it's the little things. But I'm eating the right kind of chocolate. And yes, there is a right kind of chocolate. Dark chocolate is really good for you. It has all of these benefits listed on this slide. It is proven. It does increase your blood flow. It gives you this source of so many different vitamins and antioxidants. It's really good for you. So I'm eating these chocolates, right? Not too often, but I'm eating chocolate. And when I want something sweet and nice and you know, to release my serotonin and 5-HT, this dark chocolate is it. And we also have to be mindful of the chemicals that we bring in our house and the things that we have around us. Look at the labels, look at those things that have these toxins in that can really help, well, not really help, but really contribute towards that inflammation that we may have in our bodies. And then when it comes to mental and emotional toxins, you know, when the aftermath of George Floyd murder, you know, I was just beside myself with all sorts of emotion, because I could not believe that we're literally watching a murder on TV and how casually it was done. And then it just brought me to the plight of Black people living in diaspora from the days of slavery till now, right? Things have not changed very much. It really did bring me down to a place that I thought I would never get up from. And so I had to really create that space that I would not be infiltrated with the negativity on the media and the reminders from the media. So I really controlled my social media, my Facebook, my Twitter, turned the TV off, just took it all in bite sizes. I just really created that space that I was allowed to heal and cope with what we needed to cope with. And then doubling down on my therapy, seeing my therapist once a week, making sure I had that safe space to talk and really get some structured cognitive support in how I can manage what I go through. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a lot. Again, I can talk about every section of these forever. But for the purpose of this talk, I really wanted just to give you a flavor of the things that I use and have used successfully to manage my depression. And also, I really want to drum home the point. I started doing this years ago, and I didn't realize it was helping me to the extent that it had. Because the psychiatrist said, when she saw my brain, she said, wow, I can't believe that you even have the energy to get out of bed and do all the things that you are doing today. And when she looked at my history and looked at the things that I did, she said, this is the reason why. So I am just seriously grateful that by the grace of God, I was able to tap in to that side of me and utilize those mindful tools. So let's talk about you. Let's talk about the experiences that you may be facing. Those of you that are on this call that are living with a chronic health challenge, and if you experience emotional health and how you manage that. And I want to do that by inviting 4 people onto the stage with me. And these 4 people have graciously agreed to share their story. They're living with a chronic illness, and they are managing through tremendously, because they're doing great things in the community. So if we can bring on our guests, please, that would be fantastic. Alison Smith, Gary Poley, Emma Hine, and Lewis Hine. If you can join me on the stage, that would be fantastic. So my question is, and let me start with Gary, because I met Gary at the Pass Back an Invitation, and immediately I was just blown away by Gary's presence and energy, because of the things, of the way he shows up and the things that he does in his community. So Gary, if you don't mind sharing with the audience just briefly your name, the condition you're living with, and if any of what I said resonated with you.
My name is Gary Poley. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I have had Parkinson's disease for 12 years now. And yes, everything that you have talked about, Slyvia, resonates with me. Watching our diet, watching the things that we do on a daily basis, and just being mindful of everything that we do has a huge effect on us.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. And what about you, Alison? Did any of that resonate with you?
The chocolate definitely did.
I hear you on that one.
I feel like I've had a lot of issues that when it comes to mental health, being a psychotherapist myself, I've found ways to integrate it into my life and into my practice of using meditation and breath. I think that mindfulness you spoke of, but I think that focusing a lot more on your breath is something that's very important for people.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Alison. And Lewis and Emma. Lewis, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, very good.
Good, thank you. Yeah, great.
Excellent. Lewis, do you want to share with the audience the condition that you are living with, and if any of what I spoke about resonates with you as well?
So I'm Lewis, and I have epilepsy, hydrocephalus, and and those conditions obviously come with its daily struggles, but I have a huge and great support system around me, which leads me to cope quite well on a day-to-day basis. But
He eats a lot of chocolate.
yeah, I'm guilty. I am guilty when it comes to chocolate and food in general.
And definitely watching what Lewis eats has a massive effect on his mood and his ability to function during the day, massively. And mindfulness, and as his mum, making sure I'm aware of that as well, and we are as a family as well, and we give each other that support. So yeah, that really resonated with us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing it. And I love the way Lewis just looks at you lovingly, Emma. And it clearly has a strong bond.
Yeah, we're a tag team.
I know you're a tag team, but we also met in Hawaii. So let's talk about some of those strategies that you use to manage your emotional health. I know, Gary, you're into fitness. You're a weightlifter, and you do lots of work in the gym, and you encourage others to do the same. So was that a strategy to just manage your sense of well-being, give you something to do? How did you get into that? Was that something you did before you were diagnosed?
No, I was, my only real thing that I did when I was initially diagnosed was that I was a professional couch potato. I spent a lot of time laying around, eating chocolates, drinking beer, and doing whatever I wanted to do. But the longer that went on, the more that I realized that was not going to be healthy for me, and it was not going to be a lifestyle that I was going to be able to continue with. So I started being more active in my Parkinson's support group. And we actually wanted to start a program in Savannah at the time. And I actually got connected with a Michael Cohen, who is a former Olympic weightlifter. He developed a program for us, people with Parkinson's, to specifically exercise. And then he actually got me started in volunteering to be a coach. He said, it's great when you're an Olympic athlete to try and push people. He said, but sometimes you need something that your group has that you don't necessarily have. And in my case, it was Parkinson's disease. You can usually tell, like I can tell when Allison is tired and when she's pushed herself to the limit. And some people without that disease can't tell that. So that's how I initially got started.
That's great. Thank you, Gary. And Alison, I believe you said you're a psychotherapist.
Yes.
Now, what tactics do you use to manage through, Parkinson's and maybe emotional health?
A big part of my therapy sessions and my belief system is creating a wolf pack of people. So you have a support system that you can go to. So I call it my wolf pack that's filled with nurses, friends, families, pets. My dog is a huge part of my wolf pack. Frozen yogurt's a big part of my wolf pack. Things that I can go to and turn to when things get difficult. So then that way I have a support system that I'll always have around me. So like if I have a bad day, I can go to a friend that I have in my support system that's in my wolf pack. But then I don't go to one source draining them constantly. I spread out the wealth and you have resources that I have available to me. So I really suggest finding a good wolf pack of people and to keep it strong, keep them coming in bringing lots of people.
Yeah, no, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And spreading the love is really key, because not going to the same person all the time in fear that you're going to wear them out. But having that good network around you, the positivity, is really key. And there's a question here, and I'll ask that to Emma and Lewis. You know, you have a good support system. We can see the love between you two. And Alison just talked about her strong support system. If someone doesn't have that, what can they do to connect with others to stay encouraged?
Well, that's a perfect question for Lewis, because what did you do when you had no friends, no one to talk to, nothing?
The main things that brought me to find other people to connect with and just meet new people was finding people that I can relate with, whether they've got a similar condition to me, the same condition, just finding any way possible to relate to that person, and that sort of builds one step towards building a huge friendship.
So Lewis found them on social media.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, and Lewis, I believe you created something fantastic, right, called the World of Friends at a very young age. Would you both like to share that story?
So, how old was I when we started?
You were 14.
Oh my God, that's scary. So yeah, I was 14 years old. So I was in my secondary school sort of stage, and my secondary school years were pretty tough, to say the least. Because I was going through those stages and I didn't have anyone to talk to, I couldn't make any friends, and I was being bullied at the time.
Mm.
So that sort of brought me to the point where I thought that I'm not the only one in those situations. So that pushed me to do something about it, and created an organisation, a little just platform at the time, to try and reach out to other people that are going through similar situations to what I was going through at that time, to sort of build a group and continue talking to those people, and just build sort of just like a little platform to let out our feelings and all that sort of stuff, and just talk about things that we're going through.
Yeah, Lewis, he started it and called it Friend Finder, and then he put a little video online, 60 seconds, about his life and the isolation and being disabled, and it went viral around the world. And within 1 week, he'd had 50,000 emails from other young people that are in the same position, that felt isolated by their illness and were so lonely, and it affected their mental health so badly. They said the effects of the isolation and the loneliness were worse than the physical illness. And so that number, the sheer number of people contacting him, shows you how big the problem is. So the little platform Friend Finder grew into a global charity, a World of Friends, and now it connects thousands and thousands of young people just like Lewis to talk together and help their mental health.
I found this story absolutely incredible. You know, you took something, and it really broke my heart when you said you were being bullied at school. But you took that situation and you turned it into a gift for other people, because you really helped thousands of people around the world connect and not be isolated. You must feel so proud of yourself. I know your mother is, but you must feel so proud of yourself. And I can't imagine that, you know, that must have been difficult, because, you know, you are living with a chronic illness that is unpredictable at times.
Yes, definitely. When I created the small platform, I didn't think it was going to become something that it is like currently now. And it does shock me, because even at the time I didn't realise how much of a problem it was. I just felt the need to try and do something about it, even if it was something small. I just wanted to do something to change and just sort of change people's opinions on people with chronic illnesses.
You did a great job.
It's fantastic, and thank you, Lewis, for doing that, and Mum for your support there, not to go unnoticed. So I think we've got time for one last question, and the question that's come through is, what can people do if they need motivation to become active again, or start eating healthily again, especially during the pandemic. So Alison, do you want to start by tackling that one for us?
I would love to. I think one of the things that, excuse me, has helped me is having somebody that would hold me accountable. So I'd have a friend that would meet me at the gym. We could work out outside, take walks together. Pre-COVID, we could do the gym, but now we can do walks together. But have somebody that's holding you accountable for it. Even do a Zoom cooking class together online together. And so you can learn how to cook a healthy meal together, right, connecting, but somebody's holding you accountable for those behaviors that you want to change and want to bring activity and nutrition back into your life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's so amazing what we can do with Zoom. Hey, who would have known? I had a barbecue a Sunday afternoon with my friend in Minnesota, and we were both seasoning our food and we were both doing the barbecue together, and we did that virtually. It was such good fun, even though we could not be together in person, but we can do it across different states. Gary, what about you? I know you're active in the garden. You grow your own vegetables and produce. You sent me some pictures, remember?
Yes, I did. The biggest thing that I found is that you need to have a why. You need to look at yourself. Why do I want, or why do I need to eat better? Why do I need to get outside and exercise more often? I'm very fortunate. I've got a great exercise companion. She's my dog. If I don't feel like walking, she still has a need to walk. So she's my why, and she gets me out and gets me in public. And I find that if I do one thing, I can go ahead and snowball that in the day. It's very important for me to become my own best cheerleader. I learn to celebrate the small accomplishments each day. My day has to start with making my bed, taking my dog for a walk. And then after that, I mean, it just snowballs and you can get a lot more accomplished than what you think you are.
Thank you. I like that. Taking it step by step, bite size by bite size. And just one final thought. If there is someone listening right now and they are living with some healthcare challenges and they're in the depths of despair with depression, and none of this is resonating with them, they can't smile, they can't joke about it, they can't get out of their bed. And you know, they've seen their physician, but this depression is really heavy on them. What words of hope and inspiration can you provide them? It's a tough question, I know, but I think just by your stories is very inspiring. And I'd love to start with you, Lewis.
That is a tough one because, like you say, it can be different for everyone. What will motivate them to get out of bed and sort of want to exercise or do something positive during that day? But I don't know. What would you say?
Well, what you always tell people is you're not alone. You're not on your own. And just trying to tell them that there are other people going through the same thing, and it's perfectly normal to feel the way that they feel, and to reach out to a group or online, but to understand that they are, and they will feel on their own, but to try and tell them that they're not on their own and there are other people that really genuinely do understand and want to be there for them.
That's an excellent point, Emma. And I'll close by saying, this has been a phenomenal day. This is the first time we're putting on this conference to really provide resources and share stories with people that are living with healthcare challenges and overcoming adversity and doing great inspirational things, such as you four here right now. And we will, after the conference ends, we'll have a website that's going to have a list of resources. And there will be information about all the societies that we heard from today, and we will tomorrow. And it would be great that if anyone is listening and they are feeling a little bit isolated and disconnected, just to go to that website, click on one of those resources and just connect. And once you connect, hopefully you will find some hope and realize that you are not alone. So thank you everybody for being part of this panel, for sharing your important, inspiring stories. Thank you for giving back to your community and helping others, right, despite what you are going through personally. Each and every one of you are an inspiration. And Mum, we we can't do any of this without our mothers, and the love between you two is just infectious. So thank you all very much for this time on the panel this afternoon.